just want to talk. We can do this the easy way.
Or my way.
And off he goes.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Creative Voices with Steven Silver. I am your host, and I am super excited today to have a longtime friend of mine here since I think 2000 when I first met you, Chris, on Clerks, the animated series. But animator, director, producer, you've kind of just done it all. You've been in the industry. I don't know, we'll tap into it, get into it about all the different things that you worked on. You've well known for directing on Runaway Brain. I think that debuted in 95, maybe? Yeah, maybe way back then.
95. It was nominated for the 1995 Academy Awards. So it must have been finished in, does that mean 94, I guess?
Okay,
maybe?
Right.
I'm not sure exactly how that works.
Well, that makes sense. And, you know, because again, all these things take time you start working on them until they come out. But you've kind of done it all. You know, you started, I think your first thing was Space Ace, maybe the video game, or you worked on that. And then you went into feature animation. You're an animator. Chris has been an animator on Hercules, Little Mermaid, Lion King, Oliver and Company. I mean, you've done it all, and you came into the television animation industry. And that's when I first met you, because I had a friend. I was working I started in 1997, and I met a friend who, AJ, who introduced, he said, hey, they're looking for a character designer for this Clerks, the animated series. You should submit your portfolio. And then he was friends with Wade Wazinski. He was a good friend of ours who was at the time, he was a production coordinator and now a producer. And I remember I went and met with Wade, and then Wade took my portfolio to you. And then the rest was history. And then I got a call back, hey, Chris Bailey wants to meet you. And I went. I remember the first day going into the office, going into the Disney building. I was so excited. I always remember there was like a smell in the elevator. It was a good smell, but I'm just like, I'm at Disney television animation. And I was so excited. And I remember going into the office, and you were sitting there, and we met each other for the first time, and you're flipping through my portfolio, and you were just kind of like nodding and just kind of, you know, it was just a really great meeting. I just always remember it. And then I got a test. You guys gave me a test, and then ended up working there. But today what we want to do too is just talk about Chris's project he's been working on for a while, just the indie nature of the industry. And he's created just a terrific intellectual property called Major Damage. It's about, he'll talk more about it, about this young kid, Melvin, who gets abducted by aliens and turned into his favorite superhero. And I'm going to share some clips in there. So stay tuned. You're going to see, I'm going to find that area in here, just showing some clips, and then you guys can check it out and start following Chris. But let's just kind of dive into just a little bit about just your career, getting started, and how it all began for you, because I think that's something people always want to know. How did you get your start? How did it begin? How did you make it all happen?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because when my friends and I independently, you know, all applied to go to Cal Arts, there was really no animation industry to speak of. You know, we all graduated high school sometime around 1980, give or take. And, you know, it really, Disney made a kind of, you could argue, a clunker every 4 years. It didn't really do any box office. And TV was kind of a vast wasteland of My Little Pony toys. No offense to the My Little Pony fans. But it was all toy related, not particularly inspired toys. You know, I have no problem with merchandise, as you can see by some of the things behind me. But so, you know, I was an artist, or I was a drawer. I loved comic books, and I was in high school, and I started thinking about college. And I'm not really a fine artist, so going to an art school, fine arts didn't quite make sense. A regular 4-year college, you know, I thought about that. And then I was reading a magazine called The Comics Journal that mentioned California Institute of the Arts and their character animation program. And I knew they didn't make any of those, you know, excuse me, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I had just recently discovered Warner Brothers short cartoons, and I was watching them every day. And I was like, fuck, these are really funny. And I read this article about CalArts, and I was like, well, I'm going to learn to do that. I know they don't make those anymore. I don't know if there's any jobs, but whatever I learn at this school will make me a better artist, and maybe something will happen. And that did happen. I went to CalArts, and shortly thereafter, when I first got out, there weren't a whole lot of jobs, but little things were starting to happen. I think Space Ace, you mentioned that was maybe my second or third job.
Okay.
The studios came and went about every 6 months. I worked on this project for Phil Mendez called Kissy Fur, about a little cartoon bear. And Gary Trousdale was a story guy director on that, who went on to co-direct Beauty and the Beast. And then that went out of business. And then I worked on a project called Little Nemo, and Gary Kurtz from Empire Strikes Back was producing it, and a version of Will Eisner's The Spirit. Brad Bird was going to direct that. That never quite happened. But so things were kind of happening. And then I think Space Ace was my third job. And, that was a great deal of fun. Animating superheroes and, kind of that Disney animation type of design, but superhero Jack Kirby poses.
Right.
It was really scratching my itch.
So
that's kind of how I got in, but I literally applied. That's what I tell people, apply. It's like, talk to your friends, see who's working and who's hiring, and jobs come up, and say, if there's an online way to apply, do that. But if there's someone on the inside that can help take that resume over to the person, say, hey, I just want to make sure you put eyes on this person. You might want to talk to them. They're good guy, good girl. They'll produce for you. That always helps. You mentioned later on with Clerks. Yeah, Wade, for example. I want to talk about Wade's story a little bit. Wade ran a conglomerate of comic book stores. That's where I met he and AJ. And one day, I think I was working on Mighty Joe Young as animation supervisor, and I went into the comic book store, and Wade just said, I'm kind of seeing this comic book thing kind of shrinking, and I'm still young enough that I can start over. So if something comes along, like on your side of the business, on the production side, that you think I'd be a good fit for, keep me in mind. And it was literally less than a year from that point that the Clerks job came up for me, and I needed an art coordinator. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. Kevin Smith, comics, a fantastic entry-level job for Wade, and of course he excelled at it and became a producer. But yeah, he was the one that brought me your portfolio.
Yeah. Was that your first job? Was Clerks in television?
In television, and it was just overwhelming, because I was an animator of features, and I started directing theme park projects. But those were shorts too, maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes long. I did a Small World post show and a Circle Vision pre-show, and then a couple other things. But all of a sudden, having to do, you're going to laugh at this, 6 half hours.
Right.
It was like, oh my God, I felt like Luke Skywalker. They're coming in too fast. It was just, I was used to this certain feature pace, and it was pretty overwhelming. Yeah, that was my first thing. And later, that, only did 6 episodes, even though it's very well thought of today and has other fans. When I got Kim Possible, and it was like 22. I just wrapped my head around 6. Now I got to do 22.
Right. Now, because after Clerks, I went on to another show called Weekenders, because that abruptly ended Clerks. We didn't think it was just going to end at the 6. And I remember it ended. People probably ask you all the time, why did it end? I just remember they were trying to have, and you can tell any stories too. I just remember they were trying to, Disney at the time was trying to fill a spot in primetime animation, and decided, there was nothing really happening. And they sort of reluctantly, I think, or I heard, went with Clerks and Kevin Smith. It wasn't their number one choice, but they did it, and they were desperate for something. Then Who Wants to Be a Millionaire came out. And when that came out, that was boosting in the ratings, and that was their sort of out. But that's always what I remember kind of happening, why it ended. But maybe you have other little stories that people who enjoyed that series would like to hear.
I remember it very close to that. I remember when as I understand it, Kevin Smith saw Runaway Brain, and he thought anybody that could make a cartoon like that at Disney would be a great fit for Clerks. And so I got a call from Peter Schneider. I was working on Disney's Inspector Gadget, and he said, "Hey, Peter Schneider used to run feature animation. Then he got a promotion to run all of Disney live action and animation." And so he called me and said that, "Hey, Kevin Smith asked you about doing this series, and I think you should do this." And I said, "Well, what about Inspector Gadget?" He says, "Well, we'll find someone to take your place," which my good buddy Matt O'Callaghan did. So that's how that came about. I met Dave Mandel, the showrunner, and Kevin, and they hired me. But wait, I think I'm losing track of your question. I'm telling the whole story. Oh yeah, how the ABC. So ABC was in last place, and they were definitely looking to swing for the cheap seats, and so they greenlit the show. And I remember Peter Schneider thinking that it would either be either 6 episodes or 1,000. It was really going to be all or nothing. And we did our first couple episodes, and Millionaire came out, and that show single-handedly put them in first place. And they got rid of us. I think that's right. I think they got rid of us because they didn't need us anymore.
Right.
There were people that you see should be like the Disney Channel and wholesome, and Clerks is kind of edgy, and so that's what I heard too. I just could add a little bit of backstory to how I got involved with the project and how that came about.
Right.
I know at the beginning, it's funny because the show that they replaced us with, I think it was like repeats or something of something else. It wasn't even like a real show. It was actually not doing as well as we were, but I think like the fact that they didn't need to do Clerks anymore, there were a whole bunch of people at the network. They're like,
Right. Yeah. I kind of just remember all that kind of happening. It was a little bit chaotic, I just remember that. So, what was it like? Talking of chaos, and I'm sure there's people that want to know what's it like being a showrunner? I mean, you're running, you're producing, you're directing. You were running everything. You were setting just everything up. Everyone had to show you what they were doing, and you needed to approve everything, and you got everything coming at you at every different angle. So what was your experience like, especially for the first time coming in? Like you said, it was just 6 episodes and it was coming in so fast. What was that overall feeling and experience like? What should people be aware of if they want to do something like this?
well, Dave Mandel was actually the showrunner of the show. I was the supervising director.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I liken it to being the apex of a bicycle wheel. So everybody in production, like you and the individual show directors and storyboard artists, they're all the spokes, below, pointing at me. And then because it's Kevin's property, these are his characters, he loves them, there's all these writers, and there's Dave Mandel as the showrunner. They're all the spokes on top, like pushing down on you.
Right.
So yeah, you are in this position where you're guiding the show, and you also know that you're really filling a need by people that hired you because they believe you have a kindred vision for the show. So sometimes what's difficult about it is when we'll make a call or I'll make a call. We're going to do this for Randall's bedroom, and someone says, "No, I don't think Randall's bedroom should look like that at all." And you're like, we don't really have time to change it. And it's just one shot and we're close up by the pillow. And so there are just a million things that you have to negotiate and explain and maybe go back and change that maybe aren't important to you, but they're important to all these other people on the show that have a very important voice.
Yeah. And you're working just your hours. I guess you're probably working longer than anyone for the most part, just because you're constantly, there are going to be those fires that you're putting out or having to get things revised. Everyone's got their job they have to do, but it was, you're going.
That's right. One friend of mine called being a director in TV animation to be the most expensive revisionist in all of TV animation, because the schedule is the schedule.
Yeah.
In features, if you fall behind on one thing, something else can maybe move a little forward. I mean, deadlines of the movies don't really change a lot, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of time in the middle for there to be an ebb and a flow. But TV show ships on Friday,
Right.
and which is fantastic when you get a great board and a great episode because it all kind of comes together, and there's not too much time for anybody to come in and mess with it. But when you get a weak board or something's broken, it's pretty much going to ship broken
Yeah.
unless me,
Right.
just gets in there and physically fixes it, and that's going to be after hours for the most part.
Yeah, I remember when Wade was saying, we just did the 6 episodes, but Wade said, yeah, I think I only had about 2 or 3 weeks to design the show as a character designer, but he said I was doing over 120 characters an episode or something crazy, and saying it was just so, again, people don't think about that, all the
No,
incidental characters, all the crowd scenes, everything that's happening. But do you want to share this story? I love it. I don't like talking about it when someone's almost fired, when you're not doing the job that people are expected. But while I was on that show, I was almost fired. Do you want to tell that story?
sure. Well, you were hired because when I looked at your portfolio, I realized that you could draw anything. Your life drawing and animal poses were accomplished and something I could only aspire to. Um, and you could cartoon. You could do flat cartoons. You could be a really good mimic. And you did caricatures. And a big part of the show was celebrity guest stars. So I'm like, oh my God, Silver's our guy. If he's just not slow, we're golden.
Right.
And you are not slow. You're blazingly fast, which is fantastic. But you came onto the show, and we were trying designs that were a little more comic booky, a little more like retro Hanna-Barbera, and we were really you were finding it for us, and it wasn't resonating with Kevin and Dave. It was close. They were being kind, and they'd grind us a little bit on this and that, and even after we found the style, they would pick the celebrity caricatures. And caricatures are hard.
Yeah.
And then animating caricatures is doubly hard
Right.
because every time you put them in expression, you're in danger of losing that likeness
Yeah.
that you created.
Yeah.
So we were behind. We were way behind. And I was getting pressure from my producer to replace you. And you can say, is really Silver the guy? We really were in trouble, and we really need to catch up. And I'd say, no, Silver's the guy. Once we find the style, he's the guy that's going to dig us out of this hole. And so we go, okay. But I was having that conversation probably once a week for 3 weeks, and it was getting to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I can keep him at bay much longer. And ultimately I won't. It'll be the control will be taken from me. And I remember right after one of those meetings, you kind of came around the corner of my office and poked your head in and said, so Director Bailey, I'm like, yeah, I'm just checking in to see, how's it going? Because you're not getting approvals.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when things aren't going well when you're like on the floor. And I said, Silver, everything's great. You're the guy that's going to get us out of this. You have my confidence. And which you did have my confidence. You just didn't necessarily have everybody else's confidence. Right. Those spokes that are on the upper part of the wheel that we're pushing down. But luckily, it was almost immediately after that, we got our first approvals for the style, and the work just started rolling, and you did catch us out of that. But that was pretty stressful because, one is we didn't know each other too well, but we became friendly pretty quickly. And you were my choice. Your work is great. I did believe you'd be the guy to pull us out of it. But there is that pressure when you get far behind, that people will indulge you for a while, and then you have to sort of figure out where that line is of like, well, when are they going to take this control from me?
Right.
But I think this kind of thing to make a stand on is, no, I believe in this artist. They're the one. That's a good stand to take. Conversely, I have worked with other people and friends who were slow, and not able to really give us what we wanted. And I've unfortunately had to let friends go as well.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
nothing personal about it, but
Right. That's a tough thing,
it's
Yeah.
awful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that's it's one of those shows where again it was just so fast paced. I just remember we were almost developing it while we were having to start the production aspect of it too. We were almost like still in development. I think something that a lot of students don't realize is how fast you got to be and how fast paced this is that you're playing with like real live ammunition here. This thing, the budgets are expensive. Yeah, this is going on air. And in school sometimes, right, these students will like, oh, spend a whole week just working on one character. In reality, one of the biggest things you got to have is speed and just meet those production deadlines for everything from BG to story to character to prop. It's fast paced. Yeah.
There's another aspect to what you're saying that I feel compelled to point out, and that's to be able to iterate. When you're in school, you're making your short film, you pick the angle that you can draw. And if you start drawing an angle you just change it because it's your film and you can do whatever you want. But when you're on somebody else's show, as Walt Disney said, it's hard to pick from a choice of one.
Mm,
Most directors I know and producers don't like it when you just present one.
right.
They're like, okay, what else you got?
Yeah.
What's it look like if it's more extreme or less extreme, or and I do find, not just with professionals, but I teach at a university one day a week, and I try to instill in them that understanding to see the same problem from 3 or 4 different angles and solve it different ways, because you'll be asked to do that professionally.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And just really always meeting those deadlines, right? I mean, that's such a big thing. You have the luxury when you're in school to kind of take your time, sweet time a bit, but those deadlines are really serious and it really matters
Right.
because stuff's got to get done.
Yeah, and if you aren't going to meet a deadline, as soon as you know it's tight and you might miss it, you got to call your editor or your director and you got to tell them. Because I've had people that they avoid me. They avoid picking up the phone when I call, and we kind of know what's going on, but it's like, man, just the sooner you can tell us, the sooner we can plan and get around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, deadline's super important. Yeah, I agree.
And then, so let's fast forward a bit. So I remember after Clerks, so what happens usually when you're on a production, if you're lucky, again, things are changing a lot in the studio system now, but a lot of time I remember at Disney, you'd be done with one show, they'd move you on to another show, and so that can happen. And the shows, they're typically short-lived anyway. I ended up going on to a show called Weekenders, and I work on that, and I didn't like working on that show at all. I mean, talk about anyone familiar with that show? It's just, I mean, I consider myself a chameleon, in the art, in the character design world. I can adapt to a lot of different styles, but I want to be challenged as well. In the Weekenders show, I was brought onto that second season, and it just wasn't just engaging at all. And then luckily for me, I knew you, and you reached out and said, hey, Silver, we're working on this new show, Kim Possible. Do you want to take a stab at coming up with some designs? And I was just like, oh, thank God, just anything, just get me off of this show. And I did a bunch of designs, as many as I could, present them to you. And then you guys ended up pulling me off of Weekenders full time to come on and start developing Kim Possible with you and the amazing team that we had working there. So that's where we came in. And again, that was, we could tap into that just a little bit. Again, what an amazing experience. I mean, just to be, when you work on a show, you never know how people are going to react to anything. And even when we were working on these shows and doing them, you don't realize 22 years later, people are still engaged in it. There's a lot of shows that come and fall, but you were the real meat and potatoes behind that show. You had the vision, you had the idea. I've always said, you were I've always been one of my favorite directors to work with, because you're so you're so open and you're honest, and it's just like you just and you pushed me. You always push me, and I always appreciate that. Just to keep pushing my designs and keep, hey, let's play with this some more. Let's see what else you have, and it just kind of kept going back and forth, and we ended up doing something. Again, it was an amazing show. You were season one director, right? That you were director, producer.
Yeah, I was supervising director.
Supervising director. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, Mark and Bob, who created the show, were very magnanimous. They brought me on as an equal partner. And the way that worked was like I would make notes on scripts, but it was up to them if they wanted to take those notes or not.
Right.
But by making me an equal partner, they trusted me when I got the animatic in the edit bay. If I wanted to cut dialogue or rearrange shots or change things, that was my prerogative to do. And I very rarely made changes in the script that they didn't think made the show better. So it was just a wonderful relationship. I left after Clerks. I'm racking my brain to
like, where did you go?
What I did. Because I was someplace else when Mark and Bob, they were looking for somebody else and somebody new to partner with, an artist, director, and they liked what we were doing on Clerks. They were seeing it from across the hall, and they reached out to me and sent me a script. They wanted to have a meeting, and I remember coming in and I read it. I thought it was fantastic, and there were a few little logic holes in it or questions I had. And I remember bringing those up in the meeting, like, well, so tell me about like what is this and what is that and what is the other thing. And I remember Mark just laughed and he says, well, you found all the flaws. and we just all laughed. And I think that sort of put us all at ease. And artistically, I wanted to go, I wanted you and Alan Bodner and for boards, certainly Eugene Salandra.
Yeah.
And mostly because we'd worked together and I kind of knew everyone's natural sensibility. And I knew with Kim Possible, we could sort of push it a little more that way.
Yeah.
There were a few things like Alan really wanted to do to go a little more flat and bolder with color. And it wasn't like what, Kevin or Dave were really looking for in Clerks. But I was like, hey, all that stuff that you were kind of pushing and you weren't quite able to do on Clerks? It's like, come on over in Kim Possible and we can do it there. As you can do whatever you want, actually. Yeah. Just give me a ground plane. I don't want that Mr. Magoo UPA flat where characters are sliding across a flat background. As long as you give me a ground plane, you can do whatever you want. And so, he came on and he did just that. And I remember, we worked back and forth on the main characters quite a bit. But then once that got settled, you pretty much did everything. Yeah. Occasionally I would annoy you with drawovers and go, maybe we could get some of this cartoony caricature back.
Yeah.
Like some of these earlier designs. The one funny thing, I was in a meeting and I remember doodling a she-go on a Post-it pad. And I only did the front view and I was kind of inspired by the black and white from Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
And I remember giving it to you saying, I'm thinking something like this. And in my head, I'm thinking, good luck turning that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you did it. It was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, just figuring it out, just kind of like taking it and just trying to, again, you're trying to figure out the whole, everything about it. It's always a tricky scenario, in those instances. And now when you were, let's just kind of like through that phase of we were doing, Kim Possible, and then you went on to, I don't remember, there were so many things we've gone on to after that show. And then we came back together again on the last show that I worked with you was Scooby-Doo and Guess Who? Where it was, where now it was caricature again. We talked to almost like caricature.
Now it's 50 episodes.
Exactly. Yeah, right, exactly. And so, what was that?
Well, before I want to just one other thing that you mentioned with, like while we're making these shows, and that's maybe not apparent to everybody who's on the outside of making a show, is that how much development and changes and pressures are coming while you're making it. So Mark and Bob and I, we really wanted to make a female action show, a female Johnny Quest. We loved Johnny Quest as a kid, and it's like, well, where's the girl that? And we didn't want to make her just a man in a woman's body or a guy in a girl's body. We wanted to really make her a girl when she's at school, but she's in charge. She's strong enough she can be Captain Janeway when they're on the mission. And the show is about half sitcom, half action adventure. And the studio, Disney Channel, it was that way from the beginning. And Disney Channel was very nervous about all the action scenes. And they just kept pushing back and giving notes. And it got to the point, I remember, that we all got together, the three of us, and said, well, maybe we should just have a meeting and say, what is it about the show we're making that isn't the show you think you buy? Because we think we're making the show that we pitched you.
Right.
And before we had that meeting, all of a sudden things just got a little easier. And I don't know what happened. Maybe a couple more shows came in and people kind of got into it. But I think the idea of doing an action adventure show was just anathema to some of the people at the Disney Channel that were used to just doing those sitcoms. Right. And they were a little uncomfortable by it. Because we were thinking, well, should we just ask him, do you just want us to do a show about the Bueno Nacho in school? We can do that.
Yeah. I remember when I was there was, the executive producer, Barry Blumberg, who was there at the time. And I just remember he kept coming into my cube all the time and trying to make me change stuff in my designs. Like he was getting very over my shoulder all the time. And I remember going to you and, whoever else, just like, what's going on, man? This guy keeps coming in. And you guys were just so adamant. Stop listening to him. Don't listen to a thing he says. If he ever comes back, you just tell him to sort of like bugger up. You just do your thing and, and go. And I appreciate that because I was so stressed out. Again, I was a young kid, doing this.
No, I remember that. You were stressed out. And I don't think I actually said tell him to bugger off. But
right.
Yeah. I was a little more diplomatic than that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do remember talking to Barry after, say, hey, look, you gotta believe in management and structure.
Right.
And because what had happened is, like originally, the inspiration in the back of my head for Kim was to do something really cartoony, kind of like the animated I Dream of Jeannie in the titles, the title sequence for that old show.
Yeah.
She had kind of helmet hair, big head, a little tiny torso, and chubby legs, and a lot of that kind of still has a little DNA in there. But there was I'm trying to think if it was notes from Disney Channel or someone that she was too young. And because the head of Disney Channel was very busy, Gary Marsh, I think, and Barry had never really been in a position where he had to please someone else before. He was kind of in the middle of this structure. He used to kind of be before that, he was used to calling his own shots. So I think he was, that's what caused him to jump the gun a little bit. But yeah, that really makes it difficult when especially somebody like you is getting direction from two different sources. Yeah. And you were aging her up, but I'm thinking, and there were gorgeous drawings, but I'm like, well, now she's Alias.
Right.
She's Jennifer Garner in Alias. She's no longer a teenager. There's got to be something in between. And then, so, there's one more aspect of Kim Possible, and we can move on. But, like Shag was popular at the time, and I loved that kind of, that mid-century modern animation work and UPA. And we were thinking, well, how do we make Kim, like they didn't like her too young.
Right.
And flat, because she was like a pre-teenager. We wanted Bonnie, the 18-year-old on the cheerleading team, to resent her because Kim's a freshman and she's captain of the cheerleading team, and Bonnie's curvy, and all the cheerleaders were different body shapes and all that, but she was sort of the quintessential model figure. Yeah. And then so the idea is, well, what do we do with Kim so that she isn't confused with Bonnie? Because overseas animation is very imprecise, proportions change, you can't really control that. So we said, well, what if we took a cue from Shag and we just gave her a little pointy breasts, just to show that that way her shape is triangular as opposed to the curvy hourglass. So that's a graphic shape that even if you draw it badly, it's distinctive from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a great shape and it's modern. It fits
Yeah.
Bodner's style but again, that created problems. I remember it seemed like every week I would have to have a meeting or a phone call and about Kim's pointy breasts.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, I'll make her flat. Do you want me to make her flat?
Right.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we don't want that. And I'd say, well, the problem is if we make her curvy,
Yeah.
I'm talking with my hands way too much.
Yeah.
But, I'll sit on them. The problem is that she could come off as old as Bonnie in a particular scene, and we don't want that either.
Yeah.
So tell me what to do. Those are my thoughts on the process.
Right. Yeah.
Now, you be the decider.
Yeah.
Now that you have the information, and then they would let it go until the next week, and it would come up again.
I mean,
it probably was there for probably 6 or 8 weeks before.
Right. That's the sort of like the curse and the beauty of it. There's the beauty of development and working on shows is the collaborative aspect, right? It's like people get to all come in and you're working on these things together and building something that you want the audiences to love and appreciate. But then you got all the notes. People don't realize all the notes, all the executives, everyone that's involved that's coming through. It's just this big, you don't just get to sit in your own little space in your own studio and just kind of stop. And I get the question a lot all the time, from students. They go like, how do you know when to stop your drawing? Like when you done? And I usually say when the executive tells you to, it's just like, it's kind of like when it is. It's an amazing process that it's a world that, again, a lot of people aren't familiar with. And that's what I love about animation, say over just like the comic book world. I've never done comics and I want to jump into your comic here. But I know in the comic book world, people, they, besides when they used to work in the bullpen back in the day at Marvel and DC, but it's a solo thing. You're kind of in there, you're doing your own thing, and then it might get handed off to an inker that you'll never see. It's another place and a colorist. But in the animation world, I mean, it's changed now because everyone's working at home, but I love that. That was my fondest memories all the time, is just, again, it's like here we are still just great friends after 25 years of just knowing each other just from that experience. And it's a beautiful thing in that realm.
Yeah. No, I agree, because when you all go to lunch at predominantly the same time, and you're friends with someone, and you might not be friends with the third person, but then that person is and invites them along, and you get to know each other, and you build like lifelong friendships out of it. I think that is probably a little tougher in some of those more solo ventures, or like now in TV, where all the board artists are home and they just go in maybe for a pitch or something.
For sure, sure.
But no, I can't add anything to that.
Right on. Well, let's jump into, again, Major Damage. So Major Damage, again, this is all about, I think, creators. The creative forefront today I see is not relying on studios to pick up your properties, not relying on anyone really, but creating your own independent outlets, creating your own IPs and getting that started. And that's something that you've done. I remember when we were working, you did this back on the side. You were always drawing your comics. You loved the comics, and started this Major Damage. And I think you released your first comic at San Diego Comic-Con, maybe around 2002, 2003, but you can catch us up. But tell us all about Major Damage and how that came about and what it is that you're doing. And before Chris tells us, I'm going to throw in right here some of that awesome video footage so people can see what it is that you're working on. All right, so here it is.
Melvin, we just want to talk. We can do this the easy way
Or my way.
and off he goes.
Got you! Calm down, kid!
TK, does tackling count as hitting? 'Cause it's happening!
Kitchen, clear!
Kicking! Now would be a good time!
Wait, what? Come on. on! Come on! I know we had a busy night last night, but come on!
Hey, Chris, we're back. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about the major damage. What was how did it all start? Where's it at? What are your plans with it? What are your hopes? What are you doing?
Well, I just left Disney Feature Animation, so this was, I don't know, late 90s, I guess. And I decided I was watching X-Files on TV, and I always loved superheroes and comics and that type of thing. And I was thinking, well, and I got the idea of major damage of, well, what if somehow this kid who loved comic books and loved Major Damage, this fictional comic book superhero, was abducted by aliens. They mistook him for the character in the comic book, and just like we might help some wounded, whale, that's beached itself or trapped under the ice, they decide to fix him up and send him back to Earth. And, I was inspired kind of by the alien DNA thing that was going on in X-Files, where they could just put some kind of crazy DNA in his body. And then what they do, they're inspired by the comic book as well. So they say, and all these cool things in the comic book, they're no longer like the Earth. So they do something that slowly starts morphing the Earth into that of the comic book, so that he has all kinds of mutant monsters and alien scum to deal with. So it was really my way of kind of taking like Big Meets Marvel Comics, or if Shazam was stuck in the Shazam body, and just throwing the little X-Files in there. And it was in the beginning, it was very Disney and very sort of 4-quadrant, kid-friendly. And I did a little short CGI, test. I was going to say short film, but it was really just a piece of a short film, so it's more like a test. And I did a few comic books, and I had a lot of action for a while, potentially selling it. I even had paperwork in hand with the company that made Astro Boy, and then they went out of business, and luckily I hadn't signed the deal, so I got to keep the property.
Oh, nice.
But so the deals were never quite there, where I liked it, because I just liked doing it.
Yeah.
And but it was kind of exhausting for a while. So I remember I was putting all this energy into it. I was doing comic books. I was selling stuff at San Diego Comic-Con and merch, and it was all very fun. And then I was kind of exhausted by it with the selling, and I said, until this is my job, I think it's just going to sit for a while. And it did. Then I went back in and I boarded a couple shorts, and I bought a license to Harmony. This is like 10 years ago now. And I was like, maybe I can do it all myself. Then I'd open up Harmony and I'd look at it and go, nah, I ain't working in this. And I'd close it again. So, here are a couple of this was like the very very sort of retro Marvel Comics, and the design of the little split screen at the bottom.
Nice.
And Image Comics published one. It was on the flip side. It was one of these flip comics, Savage Dragon on the back, Major Damage on the other side. That was very fun. But oh wait, shoot! I lost my train of thought. I derailed.
I mean, you were just creating your comics, and now.
That's right. So Harmony. So I still continue to develop the boards and flesh the boards out and all that in Storyboard Pro, and then I got a call out of the blue to animate on Fixed, the new Gendy Tartakovsky movie, the R-rated dog about his last 24 hours before he gets fixed. And Alice was my producer on Hercules at Disney Features. And I said, well, Alice, I haven't animated in 20 years. I mean, I draw and I do draw-overs and I give notes as an animation director on shows, but I don't do it. And she goes, no, you'd be perfect. You'd be perfect. And I said, well, are you doing it in Harmony? And she said, yes. So, okay, send me a Harmony file that someone's done of a test shot, and let me reverse engineer it. And they were working with Renegade, Daryl Van Sitters and Ashley, who I know very well. And they sent me a shot that was animated by my friend James Lopez. And looking how he did, I'm like, oh, I get this. I looking at how someone approached a shot told me what I needed to pay attention to and what I didn't need to pay attention to in the software. So I animated a little test shot of Major Damage to teach myself how to do it. And then I emailed emailed back and said, "Hey, I'm ready to animate on your show. I'm pretty confident I can give you shots." And they said, "Oh, we're going to send more overseas. We're going to outsource more than we thought. So I'm afraid we really don't have any work, but we'll let you know." So it was kind of disappointing news, but I was actually kind of elated because I'm like, oh my God, I actually can be a one-man show now and make these shorts myself.
Right.
So I hired a couple friends to do the voices and someone who was a recommendation of someone else, voice actor. One's an animation director, Mike Milo. Charlie Schlatter, who did the voice of the Flash in one of our Scooby-Doo and Guess Who's, and became friends. And
yeah, it's great.
If you do this thing for me, it'd be really great. And then Sachi Hayashi is an actress who I met through another actress that does voice acting camps and things like that. And so they all have real voices in them, and one's almost done. The major first episode's almost done, and the third one's all boarded. And I have fantastic art direction on it from a friend of mine.
How long are the episodes that you're doing?
Oh, they're very short, like 4 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very episodic. Just
nice. And so you're boarding these out, and then you're putting them, and then you're tightening it up and putting it in harmony. So that's how they're being created all right now.
Yeah, so I boarded them in Storyboard Pro, and I edited them in Storyboard Pro, and they have pretty fleshed out animatics. The timing is locked on both shorts because they have production voices. The one artistic change, it's evolved since the beginning. I said it was very 4-quadrant, and Melvin was very cute in the beginning and kind of precocious, little kid. Well, I don't know if it's because I'm a little older and a little angrier and a little more cynical, but I just decided to make him a little more of that kind of angry 13-year-old.
Right. Okay.
Who and in the premise, I introduced these two other characters, General Strike and Captain Kikazawa, who's a Japanese liaison monster fighter. And their job is to fight monsters in the world. All these monsters that have come up since the aliens that abducted Melvin created. And they discover he's major damage. So they just decide to pay him a little visit. And they essentially blackmail him into helping him, doing their light work for him, or else they're going to spill the beans with his mom and everybody else, who he really is, and put him in a government lab cage somewhere.
Nice.
So that's sort of the adversarial relationship. Together, they're like this dysfunctional family. There's a disgruntled teenager whose first response to everything is, no,
Yeah.
yeah, who's going to make me, And then General Strike is like, I'm gonna make it. And then Kiki's kind of she's like, God, you guys, she's kind of angry at that. So,
and now,
that's kind of how.
And what is your hope now? Like, what by now are you you're putting these on YouTube, and we'll share.
I put little clips on YouTube. Okay. I have a little making of.
Okay, awesome.
I'm overdue for another episode and an update.
Okay.
But I'm really just making them for me now because I love comic books, I love animation, and I love this kind of material. I love comic book characters that are physical, that get into fights and hit each other. They swear.
Right.
Because I swear. Everybody I know swears.
Yeah.
Any kid over the age of 10 swears. So that feels fun to me.
Yeah.
I guess because I'm perpetually 12. But I've gone through the business of pitching it as a show, changing the notes, according to those executive comments to take it to the next level. And then either it gets to a point where the deal's not good for me and I say never mind, or I don't pull it off for them and they say never mind.
Right.
That when I came back to it, I was like, what is it? Who are these characters? I wasn't really sure who they were anymore because I'd changed it so much according to whoever was the potential buyer at the time. And that's when I just said, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. I just want to make them. I want to draw it. I want to make it. I just want to do it for me. And if people like it, they like it. But I just need it for my soul.
Okay, nice. And so where can people find it? Where can people watch it?
There is what is my channel called? I forget what it's called. Doesn't that suck?
Okay, I'll link it. I'll link it all below. So
yeah, link it all below.
Yeah, link it all below.
I'm always like posting new shots
Yeah.
on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn when I complete something. I'm trying to be better at it, post a new little snippet every week. You know, more like every 2 or 3 weeks. And I do have the channel where I have a couple longer interviews where I actually posted the entire animatic and I've talked about it, and then I update shots. So you can take a look at it there. But yes, look at the link because
Yeah.
right now I have so many websites
Okay.
and so many LinkedIn's and all that stuff that I'm like, wait, which one is it?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think it's the
Okay.
general stripe.
All right. Well, that sounds good. So yeah, you guys just go ahead and just check out the links below. Follow him on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Just learn all about him. You could even check all the stuff that he's done on IMDb. It's just this long list. Chris has worked on so many amazing projects, done so many things in his career. So Chris, thank you so much for doing this today and being a part of this and sharing, your stories with everyone on this creative front. So just remember to be creative and make it happen. And again, thanks a lot, Chris, for joining us today in our episode of this being creative. All right, Creative
Absolutely.
Voices.
Now my website, I do
There we go.
remember, is damagefilms.com. So
Okay.
you can find me
There
at
you go.
damagefilms.com. The YouTube stuff and all the ancillary stuff, check out the links.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Stay creative. Thank you. See ya. Bye.